a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is creating the life in medicine that you want, and really specifically today, creating the life in radiology that you want. For those of you who know me or follow my work, you know that I love being a physician and I love being a radiologist. And it is definitely a huge part of who I am. I do think that one thing that we don't necessarily talk about enough in our training, we do a really good job of teaching you guys how to interpret images. What we don't do a really good job of is preparing physicians for what comes after training. And that's a lot of what I do these days, is really talking about work-life balance, talking about things like physician advocacy, all these things that are really going to empower us to be able to take charge of our careers and really take charge of our lives in medicine. Because I think that that's so important in this era where we have so much changing in the healthcare landscape, and physician burnout is on the rise and honestly only getting worse. And if you look at things from a policy standpoint, that's really scary, because there's a lot of physicians who are very uncertain about what their futures are. And what I really like to do is try to empower physicians to be able to take control of their lives and really be able to live life on their terms. And I think that at the end of the day will enable you to emphasize career longevity, which that's what you want to do at the end of the day. You don't want to be coming in thinking about, okay, now I've got 20 more years till retirement, or ideally I have 14 more years till retirement. What you want to be coming into is saying, well, how do I shape the life in medicine that I want so that I can practice for 20, 30 years if I truly do love radiology? And so that's what I want to do. Brevity is not my strong point. So instead of giving you a talk that goes into a lot of stories and anecdotes, what I'm going to try to force myself to do is just really focus in bullet point fashion about 5 pieces of advice that I find myself giving very, very frequently when I'm talking to people at your stages of your career, and actually, honestly, people at any stage of their career, because I think there's a lot of things that we don't hear enough. And so that's what I really want to do today. So the first thing I want to tell all of you guys to do, and we've alluded to this a little bit already today, is that you need to pause. And that may seem a little bit nebulous, but if you think about what you've been doing for the last 15, 20 years of your life, you took your SATs, you applied to college, then you somehow passed organic chemistry, then you took your MCATs, you went on to apply to medical school, you passed anatomy, you took your shelf exams, you applied to residency, you started learning all of your rotations. That's what you're doing right now. You're going to pass your in-services, you're going to pass your boards, you're going to apply for fellowship, then you're going to apply for jobs. And that's really great in some ways. I think that as physicians, we are used to being told what to do, and we know what the next step is, and we kind of follow along that pathway. But what we really don't do a whole lot of because of that, because we're so stuck in terms of the next goal and the next goal, so we look a lot at the trees, and we sometimes forget about the forest. And that, when you are thinking about what you're going to be doing long term, is a real problem. Because when you look at what happens with a lot of physicians as they start out with their careers, is that rate of turnover within their first decade of working, and really honestly within their first 3 to 5 years of working, is somewhat ridiculous. And part of that is because I think you're not really equipped to think about what it is that you want, because you're so used to somebody else telling you, okay, you've got to show up for rounds at 5:30, or you've got to do this, or you've got to do that. And we're really good as physicians at following directions. But I find when I talk to physicians when they're coming to me for advice, and I ask them the simple question of what they want, they have a really hard time answering that question. Because everybody says, okay, I want to be successful, I want to be, I want to do well financially, they have all these big goals, but concretely, when it comes down to asking what they want, it's very difficult for them to verbalize and articulate clearly what it is that matters to them. And what you've heard already is true. The job market is wide open. And what you're going to see as you start approaching the time where you start looking for jobs is that people are going to be throwing jobs at you left and right now. As the physician shortage gets worse, and with the market being where it is right now, there is going to be no shortage of opportunities. And it's so easy if you don't know what you're looking at or what you want personally and how you're going to prioritize things. You're going to say, oh, I really liked that group, the people were really nice, or oh, I really want to be in that location, or oh, this is the best salary that I've had. And you're going to jump towards a job based on any given factor in that small little moment. And what you need to know before you go into that, and before people are starting throwing those offers at you, so that you don't get overwhelmed by it and you don't make a hasty decision, because a lot of these people will say to you, okay, you've got to give us a response within a week. And you're going to have a hard time evaluating those options in front of you if you don't know, okay, well, to me, priority number one is that I get X amount of vacation, or priority number one is that I'm close to my family, or priority number one is that I have this amount of call responsibility. And so you need to know what those things are. And importantly, you really need to know your deal breakers. And I think this is something that people really, because we're so used to approaching residency and fellowship and training with, okay, I've just got to get through this and I can do anything and I can stay up for 24 hours and I can do X, Y, and Z. But what you realize is when you come into your job, this is the first time where you get to decide what it is that you want to do, and you have to know what that is. So if you didn't like staying up for 24 hours and that was not something that you wanted to do, guess what? For the next 3 decades, you're not going to like it anymore. In fact, you're going to like it a whole lot less. So if that's a deal breaker for you, then you need to emphasize that. I'll tell you, like for myself, when I came out of fellowship, I stayed on as a junior attending at UNC Chapel Hill for 2 years, and I did that for a number of reasons, the biggest of which, my husband was doing his plastic surgery fellowship at Duke, and we were stuck in that area for 3 years, and the job market was tight. And so although I loved that job for its own reasons, I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into why I was taking it, because it was just there and it was convenient and it worked. And that was the dictating factor. But then after he had finished his fellowship, he found a job that was really perfect for us family-wise in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they didn't have an academic medical center anymore. And I had to make some decisions about what I wanted to do with my life, because I'd always pictured myself in academics. And it was funny because for the first time I had to think, well, the job that my husband is taking is actually probably a long-term play for us. There's nothing about it that says to me that we're not going to stay there for a really long time. So I can't take a job and then have to worry about a non-compete if I don't like it, because we're not leaving Charlotte. And that was my reality at that moment. And so I didn't want to hasten to take a job that had a lot of red flags. And so I actually ended up taking about 6 months between the end of my job at UNC and when I started my next job, saying, okay, what is it that I really want, and how do I negotiate the terms of that job to reflect what it is that I really want? And I think at that stage in my life, I had been so used to, I had finished training before my husband had finished training, and I had had 2 children at that point, and a lot of things had changed about my life at that point, and I said, well, you know what? I actually have no desire to ever be in a hospital after hours ever again. And that was a thing for me. And I really put a lot of emphasis into trying to find a job that did not require me to be in the hospital after hours. And I'm really, really happy because of it. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case for all of you, but I think you have to know what it is that you're looking for so that you can tailor that job search accordingly. So know what you don't like, and know what you don't want, and what you're going to need to be happy long term, and then look for those things, because guess what? Those job options are out there right now because there is such a shortage that you do have a lot of ability to negotiate what it is that you want. But if you don't ask for it, nobody's going to offer it to you. So you have to know what it is that you're asking for. And as we alluded to earlier, you need to prioritize, right? So you can't say, I want to make $2 million a year, but I also want to work in academics and, do research. Maybe you can. Maybe you can get a patent, and maybe you could be one of the very few people who can make that kind of money in academics. But for the most part, you have to realize that there are certain things you're going to give up in every situation, and you have to know what those things are going to be. And the other thing I tell people, again, is always that you have to do this periodically, because your life will change. At some point, if and when you get married or have kids or have a midlife crisis, things are going to change throughout the course of your career. And so you have to be able to go through your career constantly sort of reevaluating whether or not it is that you're living the life that you want while you're in there. And along those lines, that transitions into something else that I really feel very importantly about, which is radiology is awesome, but it is one of many, many important pieces of your life. And burnout is real. You may already be feeling it right now, and I guarantee you it doesn't get better when you're an attending. In fact, some of the stressors are a lot more real because you don't have the same fallbacks that you might have had. And the pressure to do more and more with less is a trend right now that is not showing any signs of reversing. So a lot of these practices are like factories, and you're going to be looking at those things, and you have to find a way to be able to thrive in those environments. And I think that's something that, again, the culture of medicine is so much to just suck it up and do it and thinking that we can get through anything, but at some point that does catch up with you. And what you really want to be able to do, again, is be able to stay in this career for a long time. And so that means maintaining your personal relationships, having hobbies and interests that refresh you, maintaining your health. And these things are not, they're not selfish in any way. We're always taught to put our career at the center of everything. But honestly, even in that model where you are putting your career in the center of everything, you cannot do your career well if you yourself are not well. And so from a policy standpoint, from keeping physicians in the system, from doing what's best for your patients, burnout has real implications in terms of patient outcomes, in terms of all sorts of measures that are probably far beyond what I can get into right now. But basically, you have to take care of yourself, because you will not last in this job for 20, 30 years unless you're really keeping an eye on what it is that keeps you happy and keeps you fulfilled. The other thing I hear a lot is that I'm waiting for the right time. I'm waiting for the right time to get married. I'm waiting for the right time to have children. I don't really like my job, but this isn't the right time to leave it. Maybe in 2 or 3 years I'll leave it. You have to understand that the world never stops, and medicine doesn't quit. And so if you wait for the right time, number one, you can't always plan things. You might think that it's the right time to have a baby, or you might think it's the right time to make a job shift, and things will change. The thing that you think that you're going to be able to do maybe doesn't happen at the time that you're planning, or the job that you think that you're going to be switching to maybe isn't available 2 years from now, but it's available right now. And so at the end of the day, the rest of the world will figure itself out. I promise you it will figure itself out. You need to figure out you and what it is that you want to do. The work hard, play harder thing, I think, is really, really important. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't live to work, you work to live. And you got to keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, we know in medicine better than anyone that nothing is ever guaranteed, and things can change overnight. And if you don't enjoy where you are at this stage in your life, one thing that we do in medicine so often is delayed gratification and the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, you're here now, and this is the time to start thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to make yourselves happy. So that's really, really important. Number 3, we've alluded to this already today in today's symposium, but you need to learn about the business of medicine. It is not all about reading more studies. You will not necessarily make more money just because you read more studies. You have to understand the business side of things, and especially in today's healthcare landscape, if you don't understand that, trust me, there is somebody else that's out there that's looking at this industry that makes up such a significant portion of the GDP, and they're going to find a way to make money from it. And it may be at your expense. So you need to understand what's going on. You need to understand the consolidation that's happening in the market. You need to understand how billing works, how marketing works. You need to know what's changing in your local job market, what the other groups are doing, and how you need to change to evolve. Those are all things you really have to understand. The next thing I feel very, very strongly about, and it's a big part of what I do when I'm working with people in the group that was alluded to earlier. It is absolutely your right, and it is absolutely your duty to be your own advocate. At the end of the day, no matter where you take a job, whether it is an academic job, whether it is owned by a hospital, whether it's a private practice, whether it's corporate owned, everybody is running a business. And you better believe that they're going to run the business in a way that minimizes expenses to maximize their profits. And that doesn't make them bad, that makes them smart businessmen. But at the end of the day, you, on your end, also have to stand up for yourself and stand up for your worth. And in today's market, you really do have a lot of worth. And you've got to believe in that. You've got to understand what your worth is. You've got to do your research to find out what that worth is. And so you've got to go out there, you've got to figure out what other people are being paid. You've got to figure out what that group needs, what they've had problems with in terms of retention, where you can sell yourself as something that somebody else can't provide so that you can come to that bargaining table and say, this is what I'm worth. And they may tell you you're worth 30, 40% less, and you need to be able to say, I'm going to walk away from the table because I know you can't get that 30, 40% less because I know this market. And when you can come to a negotiating table with that kind of power, I guarantee you, you are going to do better, and you have to do better, because otherwise, as a whole, we all hurt each other. Another big thing in that regard is that you need to ask around. Ask other residents that you have worked with that are years ahead of you. Figure out what they're getting paid. You know, we don't talk a lot about money, but that's a bad thing. We need more salary transparency. And so share with each other the job offers that you're getting. Share with each other what the structures of things are so that you all know what it is that you can ask for and what your worth is. We talked about this just now with knowing about or learning about your finances. And so I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty because we've already done that. But I want you to know that talking about money is not bad. I think in medicine we have this culture where we almost view it as sort of uncouth to talk about how much money we make or how to make more money. And that's not something that in today's healthcare landscape is going to help anyone, patients, doctors, anybody. It is an act of survival to understand the finances of medicine. It is an act of survival to understand your own personal finances. You have the ability now to make money. You have the ability to make a lot of money now. But you need to learn to keep that money, and you need to learn how to make that money make money. And the reason for that is not just so that you can, retire at 43 on some beautiful island. It's really because financial security gives you the ability to live the life that you want. It gives you the ability to walk away from a negotiating table. It gives you the ability to walk away from a bad job if somebody's not treating you fairly. It gives you the ability to say, hey, you know what, I'd really like to go down to 4 days a week or 3 days a week. Or I'd really like to drop those extra calls and sell those calls to other people because I don't have to worry about the finances of it all. And in terms of helping each other out, that's something that's really, really important too, because when your group gets approached for different things, if there are people in your group that really, really need the money because they haven't been taking care of their finances, and that's the majority of your group, you're going to get pulled into a very bad situation by the people who really need that money. So we, as a physician population, really need to be talking about money and educating each other about money, because the better that you will never have a stronger position at a negotiating table than the ability to walk away. And financial security gives you that ability. So that's something that you really need to spend some time doing. We talked about protecting your lifestyle with adequate insurance. If you have a family, you need life insurance. You need disability insurance. Everybody thinks that they won't need it, and unfortunately, a significant portion of people do end up needing it and needing to use it. And people would not or don't qualify for insurance a lot earlier than they think that they might not. So everybody thinks they're going to be healthy. And remind yourselves, you're physicians, you see all the bad things that can happen, and it doesn't take a whole lot. If you get pregnant and you get gestational diabetes, you're going to have a lot higher premiums. You may not be insurable for a while. These are all things that we don't think about when we're young and healthy, but they happen overnight and they change things. So you've worked really, really hard to get where you are right now. Make sure that you protect that ability to do things. And then the very last piece of advice that I have is to keep your eyes open and keep your ears active. So while it might be really good for efficiency in your daily life as a radiologist to be in a dark room by yourself, it's not a good way to approach your career. There are so many things changing right now, and if you don't adapt with those things, you will not be successful in your career. And that means networking, that means getting to know other people and other practices and being able to run ideas by them. That means being active in societies where you can push for political change and advocate for the things that affect your practice. And most of all, it really means having the ability to evolve with everything that goes around you. And I think if that's really my big message to all of you here, is that things are changing. Physician burnout is changing. We hear all these things about AI. We hear all these things about all these things that are going to impact our career. Technology in radiology is always changing. Everything about your career is going to change, and it's not going to be the same as it is when you leave residency. And so you need to be able to set yourself up to be able to deal with all those challenges, to look ahead and see them coming and, pivot accordingly, because that's how you're going to be successful. So those are my tips for having a successful career in radiology. And I didn't get into a lot of details about these things. Honestly, I could probably go on for an hour about any one of those bullet points. But if you have questions or if you need resources in regards to any of those things, that's a large part of what I do these days. So feel free to contact me by any of these means, and I would love to help out if I can.